researchers on an extraordinary mission to find a piece of American military history lost deep in the South Pacific.
Locate a site 60 miles off the coast of New Jersey. And what we find in 230 feet of water is a German U-boat from World War II.
They weren't looking for it. No one was. Yet, on a cold, murky dive in the Atlantic, John Chatterton stumbled upon U-869, a German U-boat perfectly preserved, lying where no records said it could exist. Every official account claimed it had sunk thousands of miles away. Every historian had closed the case, and yet there it was. Steel frozen in time, a floating tomb holding mysteries governments had tried to bury. What was it doing here? Who or what was inside? And why does its existence rewrite everything we thought we knew about the war at sea? Tonight we dive into the depths, uncover the evidence, and reveal the secrets of U-869, the submarine history forgotten. Impossible discovery. John Chatterton had been diving for decades. To him, the ocean was familiar, almost like a second home, and he had explored countless shipwrecks along the east coast of America.
We're taking a dive into history this morning. 75 years after a life-or-death battle off our eastern shore.
Rusted hulls, broken masts, scattered cargo, so he had seen it all. Yet that morning, something felt different. He did not know it yet, but the sea was about to show him a secret it had kept hidden for nearly 50 years. He and his team set out early, the sun barely breaking the horizon. The waves were calm, but John sensed tension in the air, the kind only experienced divers feel when the unknown is waiting below. With every mile they motored toward the coordinates given by a local fisherman, he could not shake the feeling that today's dive might be unlike any other. Something about those numbers whispered danger and mystery in equal measure. Descending into the dark Atlantic, John's flashlight barely cut through the cold, murky water. For hours, the team moved carefully, navigating the rocky sea floor, scanning for shapes. Then a long, narrow shadow. At first, he thought it was another old shipwreck, but as he approached, details became clear. The hull was smooth, sharp, and precise. The tower rising above it was unmistakably German. It was a U-boat, a machine of war from World War II, sitting here in a place where, according to every official record, it could not exist. John's heart pounded. He had read about U-boats and studied maps of sunken submarines countless times. Every record claimed that every German submarine lost in this area was already accounted for. Allied forces had documented each sinking. German archives listed every U-boat that had failed to return. Even the US Navy believed it knew the locations of all enemy wrecks along the coast. And yet, here it was, lying on the seabed, as if time had stopped around it. He swam closer, inspecting the details. The hull plates bore the marks of wartime construction, the steel rivets perfectly lined.
The U.S. and Britain instituted a system of ocean-going convoys. Cargo ships bound for England sailed close together and relied on destroyer escorts to protect them.
The conning tower had a distinct design unique to a specific class of German submarines. Every detail screamed authenticity. This was no misidentification. This was real, and yet something about it felt wrong. Why was it here? Why had it not been recorded? How could history have missed it completely? The questions weighed heavily as John surfaced, breaking through the ocean's gray ceiling into the daylight. His mind raced. He grabbed books and old naval charts, flipping through records at an almost frantic pace. He called experts, shared photographs, and cross-referenced maps from the 1940s. The more he investigated, the more impossible it seemed. Every answer he found said the same thing. This submarine should not exist here. The wreck offered no clues about its identity, no number, no nameplate, no serial marks. It was as if someone or some force had deliberately erased it from history, hiding it in plain sight beneath the waves. Yet despite the uncertainty, John could feel the story calling to him. There were whispers in the water, echoes of the past trapped inside the metal walls, waiting for someone brave enough to uncover them. Years went by. Divers returned repeatedly, descending into freezing water, battling strong currents, and risking nitrogen narcosis at depths where even the smallest mistake could be deadly. The wreck became legendary, whispered about in diving communities. Some called it cursed. Several divers lost their lives trying to explore it. Yet John never wavered. He was determined. He believed the U-boat held secrets that would rewrite history, secrets hidden beneath layers of mud, corrosion, and silence. Each dive revealed more twisted pieces of metal here, a collapsed hatch there, faint signs that the interior had been hastily abandoned or damaged by something unseen. With every descent, the story of the submarine began to emerge, fragment by fragment. But the ocean, cold and dark, was not generous. It only revealed what it wanted, and the deeper John went, the more he realized that this discovery was unlike any other he had made. Finally, as he hovered above the shadow of the hull one cold morning, the truth began to feel tangible. He could almost sense the crew trapped inside decades ago, their lives ended in ways that history had never recorded. The U-boat was not just a machine, it was a grave, a time capsule of terror, loss, and silence. John understood that uncovering its secrets would not just challenge historical records, it would challenge what people believed about war, death, and the stories the ocean keeps hidden. The submarine that should not exist. To understand why this discovery shocked the world, we have to go back to World War II. Germany had built hundreds of submarines, known as U-boats, designed to dominate the Atlantic Ocean. These machines were sleek, fast, and deadly. They could strike without warning, disappearing into the depths after an attack.
U-boats developed a stranglehold on Britain that was only broken with the American intervention in 1917.
Early in the war, U-boats were feared across the seas. Ships vanished, convoys were sunk, and the Allied forces had no easy answer. But as the years passed, technology began to catch up. Radar, sonar, and long-range aircraft gave the Allies an edge. Slowly, the hunter became the hunted. By 1944, life aboard a U-boat had become almost a death sentence. Nearly 40,000 men served on these submarines during the war. Out of them, about 30,000 never returned home. That's a staggering loss rate of 75%. Every mission carried the shadow of danger. Every patrol could be the last. Among these submarines was one named U-869. According to official records, it had been sunk far from America, near the coast of Africa, in 1945. The German Navy documented its loss. Families were told their sons had died thousands of miles away. And for nearly 50 years, no one questioned that story. The world believed it was true. Then John Chatterton and his team discovered something that no one expected. The wreck was sitting just off the coast of the United States, hidden under 230 feet of cold Atlantic water. The maps, the records, the history books, everything said this was impossible. Either the divers were mistaken, or history itself was wrong. Investigators pored over the wreck, examining every steel plate, every twisted piece of metal. The damage patterns told a story far stranger than anyone had imagined. The steel hull was torn inward at one spot, not crushed from the outside. That meant it wasn't a depth charge from an Allied ship or a bomb from the air. The force had come from a single precise explosion right inside the submarine. But there was another puzzle. No Allied vessel reported attacking a submarine in that location. No battle had been recorded, no victory claimed. How could U-869 have been destroyed so far from where it was supposed to sink? The answer was chilling. It wasn't an enemy that killed this submarine. It was its own weapon. In late 1944, German torpedoes were equipped with an early acoustic homing system. They could detect engine noise and track ships automatically. In theory, this gave U-boats a deadly advantage.
Mark 8 torpedoes speed toward the German U-boat at over 50 miles per hour. Each contains 805 pounds of the explosive Torpex.
In practice, the system was flawed. Sometimes the torpedo failed. Sometimes it locked onto the wrong sound. And sometimes, in the worst-case scenario, it turned back toward the submarine that fired it. Evidence suggested this is exactly what happened. U-869 launched a torpedo at an enemy ship, or at least the crew thought they did. But the weapon didn't reach its target. Instead, it circled back, and following the loudest engine in the water, its own. Seconds later, the torpedo struck the control room. Water flooded in immediately. Steel walls buckled. The center of the submarine became a tomb in an instant. Yet not every man aboard died instantly. The U-boat was divided into multiple watertight sections. Some crew members were trapped in other compartments, separated by heavy steel doors. They felt the shock of the explosion, heard the groaning of metal, and sensed the submarine tilting as it sank toward the sea floor. They knew escape was impossible. The pressure of the water would crush them. The darkness was total. They had no chance. Minutes passed, perhaps hours. For these sailors, time had no meaning. This was not a sudden death in battle. It was a slow, silent ending in the dark. The submarine that had once hunted others had turned on its own crew. It became a grave not in foreign waters, but near the coast of a country they had never intended to reach. The discovery of U-869 forced historians to confront an uncomfortable truth. Even official records, even decades of documented history, can be wrong. The ocean had hidden the real story for 50 years, keeping secrets of men, machines, and mistakes that no one had expected to uncover. This was a submarine that should not have existed in American waters, a story that rewrote history, and a tragedy that reminded the world of how fragile life and truth can be beneath the waves. The torpedo that turned the most shocking part of U-869's story wasn't its location. The true horror lay in how it had been destroyed. When experts first examined the wreck, their eyes were drawn to the twisted steel of the submarine's hull. Patterns of damage were clear, yet puzzling. Unlike damage caused by depth charges or shell fire from enemy ships, the metal wasn't crushed from the outside. Instead, it was pushed inward, focused on a single spot. That detail told a terrifying story. The explosion had happened almost right next to the submarine itself. In 1944, German U-boats had a new kind of torpedo. Unlike older weapons, these torpedoes could listen underwater, following the sound of ship engines and tracking them automatically. It was revolutionary technology, giving submarines an almost unfair advantage against Allied shipping. But this cutting-edge weapon also carried enormous risks. Engineers warned that if the acoustic system failed, the torpedo could do something unthinkable. It could turn back toward the loudest noise in the water, and the loudest noise often belonged to the submarine that fired it. Investigators pieced together what had happened. U-869 had been on patrol, scanning the dark Atlantic for enemy vessels. The crew spotted a target, or thought they did, and fired a torpedo. They expected it to travel straight, silently hunting its prey, and then they would hear the distant explosion of a sinking ship. But this time, the torpedo betrayed them. Instead of chasing the enemy, it curved through the water, guided by the submarine's own engines, seeking the sound of its creators. There was no warning, no distant splash, no chance to dive or maneuver. In an instant, the weapon struck the control room, the heart of the submarine. The blast tore through steel, and flooding compartments with crushing water. The lights went out, leaving the crew in darkness. Equipment was shattered, bulkheads buckled, and the vessel began an uncontrollable descent toward the seafloor. For the men trapped inside, the submarine became a tomb in seconds. This was not a battle fought with bullets or bombs from afar. The enemy had not come from above or from another ship. It came from within, from the very weapon designed to give them an edge in combat. History had long blamed the Allies for U-869's sinking, citing attacks near Africa as the cause. But the wreck itself told a different story. The steel screamed a truth the records never captured. The loss was not caused by enemy forces. It had been a tragic accident, the submarine destroyed by its own torpedo. Even decades later, standing above the wreck site, the divers could sense the eeriness of that final moment. Every bolt, every piece of twisted metal spoke of a sudden, unstoppable disaster. The horror wasn't just in the explosion itself, it was in the betrayal of technology. A weapon meant to protect became a harbinger of death. And while the men in the aft section survived the initial blast, they were trapped. They could hear the chaos, feel the tilting hull, and understand that the end was coming. Slowly, silently, with no hope of escape. The discovery changed everything historians believed about U-869. The wreck was no longer just a lost submarine. It was proof of human error, of deadly technology, and of lives snatched away in the cold depths of the Atlantic. The torpedo that turned back had rewritten history, and the sea held the evidence for anyone brave enough to uncover it. I trapped in darkness. The horror of U-869 didn't end with the torpedo strike. For some of the crew, it had only just begun. While the control room was instantly destroyed, other compartments were sealed tight. Men in these sections survived the initial blast, but survival came with a nightmare of its own. They were trapped. Deep beneath the Atlantic, in complete darkness, they could hear the chaos around them, the groaning metal, the flood creeping through the bow. Every second brought them closer to a death that couldn't be fought or outrun. At 230 feet below the surface, the water pressure was merciless. Even if the sailors had managed to open a hatch, escaping to the surface was impossible without proper decompression. The cold bit through the steel walls, seeping into their bones. Their lungs burned for air that could never reach them in time. The men understood the gravity of their situation immediately. They could feel the submarine tilting as it sank, the faint vibration of engines slowing, the waves of water pressing against the hull. They were trapped inside a metal coffin. Inside the aft compartments, panic must have been constant. In those first terrifying moments, every man would have realized there was no hope of escape. There was no signal flare, no radio call, no assistance from the surface. The silence was broken only by the sound of water rushing, metal bending, and the distant, muffled destruction of the forward sections. Some may have clutched at their friends, some may have whispered prayers, while others stared at the walls, waiting for the inevitable. Investigators, years later, pieced together the scene from the wreck itself. Human remains found in the aft sections showed no evidence of the initial explosion, only the slow, suffocating effect of flooding and pressure. Bones were scattered in ways that suggested movement and struggle, yet none could have escaped. Objects lay mixed with debris, personal belongings shifted in the descent, telling the story of men who knew their end was coming but could do nothing to stop it. For decades, historians had thought U-869's crew had died instantly. But the wreck revealed a darker truth. Some men survived the blast, conscious as the submarine sank into the dark, frigid depths. They were fully aware of their fate. Their final minutes stretched long and terrifying, marked by sounds of destruction, the tilting of their steel prison, and the cold embrace of the Atlantic. And this was not a quick death. It was slow, methodical, and agonizing. Divers who later explored U-869 spoke of the eerie silence that hung inside the wreck even decades later. The compartments were still intact enough to feel the scale of what had happened. Every twist of metal, every bent bulkhead, every scattered artifact whispered the story of men trapped with no hope. It was impossible not to imagine what it felt like hearing the flood, feeling the descent, knowing there was nothing to do but wait. This compartmentalized tragedy is what makes U-869 more than a lost submarine. It is a haunting lesson about technology, war, and the fragility of human life under pressure, literally and figuratively. The men didn't just die, they endured a final ordeal, trapped in darkness, where every heartbeat was a reminder of the slow, yet inescapable force of the ocean. History rewritten. Years after U-869 first appeared on the ocean floor, the mystery surrounding it finally began to unravel, but in a way no one expected. For decades, divers had been puzzled, historians had argued, and families of the lost crew had been left believing their loved ones perished thousands of miles from home. The wreck offered clues, but it wasn't until one small, seemingly ordinary object was recovered that the entire story shifted. A diver exploring the aft compartments of the submarine noticed something partially buried in thick layers of silt that had accumulated over decades. He dug carefully, brushing away the stubborn mud until a metallic shape emerged. It was a knife, rusted, worn, yet intact. On the handle, a faint engraving could be seen. Letters slowly revealed themselves as the mud and corrosion were cleaned away. A name appeared. One that was recorded in the crew logs of U-869. The diver held the knife in his hands, feeling the weight of the years and the silence of the ocean. That simple object carried proof that could not be denied. German naval historians were contacted, and the name was verified against official files. It matched perfectly. Suddenly, a decades-old mystery snapped into focus. The submarine lying 230 feet beneath the Atlantic near New Jersey was not some unknown, unrecorded vessel. It was U-869, the same submarine that had long been believed destroyed off the coast of Africa. This revelation shook the foundations of naval history. For nearly 50 years, official records had confidently listed U-869's final resting place near Gibraltar, thousands of miles from the American coastline. Families had mourned their sons, brothers, and husbands, believing they had died in distant waters. Some had even traveled across oceans to honor their memory, scattering flowers and holding quiet ceremonies on foreign beaches. Now the truth emerged. Their loved ones had been resting much closer to home than anyone had imagined. American waters, not African seas, cradled the remains of U-869 and its crew. For those families, the discovery was a mixture of relief and grief. Relief because the location was finally known. Grief because decades of false closure had masked the reality of the men's deaths. When relatives visited the wreck site, standing on the deck of boats above the submarine, they dropped flowers into the Atlantic. In the flowers floated briefly before sinking quietly into the depths, a solemn tribute to the men trapped beneath. It was a powerful reminder that history, even when carefully recorded, can hide truths that only time and persistence can reveal. This discovery forced historians to confront a difficult reality. Even meticulous war records can fail. Official reports, logs, and battle accounts documents trusted for decades had contained an error. One submarine, hidden for 50 years, proved that history is not always complete. Human error, wartime confusion, and assumptions left gaps that only the wreck itself could fill. The ocean, vast and merciless, had kept the secret. For half a century, it held the truth of U-869 tightly in its cold, dark grasp.
The U-869?
Yeah.
There were 2 destroyer escorts assigned to sink it. We were one of the 2.
The wreck was patient, silent, waiting for someone willing to uncover its story. And finally, through the discovery of one small knife, the tale of the lost submarine was revealed. History had been rewritten, families had closure, and the ocean, which had kept the secret for decades, finally spoke. The lost Nazi submarine was not just a piece of broken steel, it was a message from the past. It showed how war can erase stories, hide mistakes, and leave families with answers that are only half true. The crew of U-869 never reached home. Some died in seconds. Others faced the dark with no escape and no voice to tell what happened. For decades, the world believed one version of their ending. The ocean revealed another. Today, the submarine still rests in deep water, slowly falling apart. Inside remain the signs of fear, duty, and a terrible accident. It is both a warning and a reminder. History can be rewritten by one discovery. Truth can rise after many years of silence. And sometimes, the most horrifying stories are not about enemies. They are about what happens when humans are trapped by their own machines.